Explosion reported in Doha. Israeli jets struck a residential compound. U.S. Central Command has no comment. In September 2025, the American security umbrella didn't just leak, it collapsed. When Israeli jets struck the capital of a U.S. ally, Riyadh realized they were next. But the Crown Prince didn't ask for help. He activated a plan that terrified the Pentagon. He turned to the only Muslim nation with a nuclear arsenal and signed a pact that threatened to rewrite the rules of the Middle East. This is the story of the most dangerous game of poker ever played in the Gulf. A game where the chips were F-35 fighter jets and the leverage was the bomb. Welcome to ATM, where we decode the complex reality behind the headlines. Let's go back to the moment it all began, 3:46 p.m., Doha.
They report the chaos. We reveal the agenda.
Lek Taifia District, Doha, Qatar, 3:46 p.m. on September 9th, 2025. The unspoken rules of the Middle East were incinerated in a fireball in Doha. Israeli jets struck a residential compound in the capital of a U.S. ally, targeting Hamas leadership. It was a precision strike that missed its primary targets, but shattered something far more valuable: the illusion of American protection. Qatar hosts Al Udeid Air Base, the forward headquarters of U.S. Central Command. Yet, American radar either missed the jets or Washington stood down. In Riyadh, the message received by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman was chilling. If the Americans couldn't or wouldn't protect Doha, they wouldn't protect Riyadh. The Saudis looked at the smoking ruins in Doha and realized they were naked. The oil for security pact was dead. MBS knew he needed an insurance policy that Israel respected and the U.S. feared. And he needed it fast. While Washington issued press releases, Riyadh went dark. Diplomatic cables burned between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. The Saudis didn't want a meeting. They wanted an army. And not just any army. The only Muslim military with a nuclear arsenal. Within days, Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and the true power behind the throne, Field Marshal Asim Munir, were in the air. They weren't coming for tea. They were coming to sign a document that would terrify the West. MBS was about to play a card that had been hidden in the deck for decades. A Plan B that would force Donald Trump to make a choice: lose the Gulf to a nuclear-armed Islamic alliance, or give the Saudis exactly what they wanted. In the shadows of Riyadh's palaces, the ink dried on a pact that rewrote the Middle East's power map. Saudi Arabia gained access to Pakistan's nuclear umbrella, while Pakistan secured economic lifelines from Gulf oil wealth. The alliance was born, a nuclear shield against perceived betrayals. This wasn't just defense, it was a signal to the world. The Gulf's stability now hinged on Islamabad's arsenal. Washington scrambled as intelligence leaks confirmed the deal. Trump faced backlash at home, accusations of weakness abroad. Israel bolstered its borders, fearing a unified Islamic front. Iran watched warily, its own ambitions checked by this new bloc. The U.S. oil for security era crumbled. Allies sought alternatives, and the world edged closer to a new Cold War in the Gulf. By September 16, 2025, betrayal had forged vulnerability into strength. The Saudi-Pakistani axis challenged old orders, forcing a recalibration of power. In the game of nations, trust is the first casualty and the last illusion to die. On September 17, 2025, a historic event unfolded in Riyadh, reshaping the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East and beyond. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif formally signed the Strategic Mutual Defense Agreement, or SMDA. This landmark pact, a culmination of decades of strategic partnership, was met with flashing cameras and intense global scrutiny. The agreement's core principle was stark and deliberate. Any act of aggression against one nation would be considered an act of aggression against both. This language directly mirrored NATO's Article 5, signaling a profound shift in regional alliances and security guarantees. Beyond mutual defense, the SMDA encompasses extensive cooperation in military training, intelligence sharing, and joint defense production. This deepens a relationship rooted in history, with Pakistan having been Saudi Arabia's closest Muslim ally since its independence in 1947. For decades, Pakistan has provided crucial military support and training to the Saudi armed forces, a bond solidified by shared strategic interests. In the 1960s, Pakistani troops were stationed in Saudi Arabia, and thousands of Saudi military personnel have since benefited from Pakistani training. The formalization of this defense agreement in 2025 was driven by several critical factors. Heightened geopolitical tensions in the Middle East, particularly recent Israeli strikes on Qatar, raised significant concerns about regional stability. These events, coupled with growing doubts about the United States' long-term commitment as a security guarantor, pushed Saudi Arabia to seek new assurances. These events, coupled with growing doubts about the United States' long-term commitment as a security guarantor, pushed Saudi Arabia to seek new assurances. The SMDA thus reflects Saudi Arabia's strategic imperative to diversify its defense alliances and reduce its historical over-reliance on the U.S. While the full text of the agreement remains largely undisclosed, its core principle of collective security is clear, but the implications extend far beyond conventional defense. Pakistan possesses an estimated 170 nuclear warheads. When you invoke all military means with a nuclear power, you are implicitly extending a nuclear umbrella. This was a moment where the world truly blinked, recognizing the profound shift in regional power dynamics. Pakistani Defense Minister Khawaja Asif confidently stated, "What we have, our capabilities, will be made available. If there is aggression, it will be jointly defended." The phrase "our capabilities" was deliberately ambiguous, yet incredibly potent. This statement, though not officially confirmed, strongly implied a potential nuclear umbrella for Saudi Arabia. The interview rapidly went viral, causing immediate alarm in Tel Aviv and Washington. Intelligence agencies scrambled to decipher the true extent of this new alliance. The critical question emerged: had Saudi Arabia, a non-nuclear state, effectively become a nuclear power by proxy? Many analysts interpreted this as a direct and powerful signal to Israel, a nation widely believed to possess its own nuclear arsenal. Israel's reaction was one of fury. Having recently demonstrated its strength with strikes on Doha, it now faced an unintended consequence. They had inadvertently catalyzed the creation of a potential Islamic NATO, now seemingly backed by a nuclear deterrent. The State Department's phones began to ring off the hook as the agreement posed a significant strategic challenge to India. This pact could potentially lead to new and complex alliances, such as an India-Israel military treaty, further complicating regional dynamics. China, a close ally of Pakistan and a key player in the Belt and Road Initiative, also found its strategic interests affected. A perceived reduction in U.S. influence in the Middle East stemming from this Saudi-Pakistan alliance could create new opportunities for Beijing to expand its footprint. The United States was closely monitoring the pact, expressing deep concerns about the potential transfer of Pakistan's nuclear technology or military expertise. Then came the calculated retreat. Pakistani officials issued a clarification stating that nuclear weapons were not explicitly on the radar. But the damage, or more accurately, the strategic leverage, had already been achieved. The message was clear. MBS had offered Washington a stark glimpse of a future without its unwavering influence. A future where Saudi money could potentially fund Pakistani nuclear capabilities, operating independently of American control. This move forced Washington to fundamentally reassess its long-standing approach to regional security and its relationship with Riyadh. It was a masterclass in geopolitical maneuvering, a shakedown. MBS put a loaded gun on the table. He didn't necessarily want to use it. He just wanted the Americans to see it, to understand the new stakes. Pakistan's nuclear doctrine, based on minimum credible deterrence, includes the option of first use in the event of war. This doctrine is largely a response to the conventional military asymmetry with India and a lack of strategic depth. Pakistan's nuclear strategy is intricately linked to deterring both conventional and nuclear threats, particularly from its eastern neighbor. Despite the clear strategic advantages for both nations, the SMDA also introduces significant potential risks and challenges. The lack of transparency regarding the agreement's full details and the ambiguity surrounding nuclear cooperation could fuel regional instability. Concerns about nuclear proliferation and the potential for an arms race in the already volatile Middle East are now more pronounced than ever. Furthermore, this agreement could complicate Saudi Arabia's relationships with other key countries, such as India, with whom it has been cultivating closer ties. Balancing these intricate relationships while steadfastly maintaining the alliance with Pakistan will undoubtedly be a critical challenge for Saudi Arabia's foreign policy. The trap was meticulously set. The United States could no longer afford to take Saudi loyalty for granted, as it had for decades. The panic in Washington was palpable, signaling a clear need to re-engage and effectively buy MBS back into their sphere of influence. But the price of that loyalty in this new geopolitical reality was about to go up, way up. This agreement reflects a dramatically changing security landscape in the Middle East, driven by regional tensions and a re-evaluation of U.S. commitment. While offering strategic advantages to both Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, it also presents profound risks that demand careful management to avoid further destabilizing an already volatile region. October 2025, the panic month. Realizing that the Saudi-Pakistan axis could shift the global balance of power, the Trump administration launched a frantic diplomatic offensive. The goal: break the axis. General Kurilla was dispatched to Islamabad. The U.S. suddenly rediscovered its love for Pakistan, offering counterterrorism aid and military support. They were trying to peel Islamabad away from Riyadh. But the real negotiation was happening in the shadows with MBS. MBS presented his demands. They were audacious. He didn't just want weapons. He wanted the crown jewels, the F-35 Lightning II, the stealth fighter Israel had lobbied for years to keep out of Arab hands. Normally, the Israel lobby would kill an F-35 sale to Saudi Arabia in 5 minutes. But this time, the alternative was worse. A Saudi Arabia aligned with Pakistan and China? That's a strategic nightmare. MBS knew he had them. The Israelis were apoplectic. the IDF issued position papers warning that F-35s in Saudi hands would erode their regional superiority. But Donald Trump, eyeing a legacy deal and desperate to stop the Chinese and Pakistani influence, began to waver. The Crown Prince doubled down. He offered a carrot to go with the stick, a $1 trillion investment package in the U.S. economy, jobs for Americans, F-35s for Saudis. The deal was becoming irresistible. By late October, the resistance in Washington crumbled. The fear of the Pakistan option, the nuclear ambiguity, had done its work. The invite was sent. MBS was coming to the White House. The deal is cut. 7 years after the murder of Jamal Khashoggi made him a pariah, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman stepped onto the red carpet in Washington, D.C. He wasn't there as a supplicant. He was there as a victor. The symbolism was deafening. The very planes he had demanded were now flying in his honor. It was a public declaration that the embargo was over. We're going to have a deal. They're going to purchase F-35s. They've been a great ally. The terms were historic. President Trump formally designated Saudi Arabia a major non-NATO ally. The F-35 sale was approved, bypassing Israeli objections. In exchange, MBS pledged $1 trillion to U.S. sectors like AI and infrastructure. Notice what wasn't mentioned? The Pakistan Pact. It wasn't canceled, but it went quiet. It served its purpose. It was the leverage that pried the door open. The Saudi-Pakistan Pact remains on the books, a dormant threat, a break glass in case of emergency option. But the message to the world was clear. The client state had successfully coerced the superpower. The sun sets over the Persian Gulf. An F-35 with Saudi markings flies alongside a Pakistani JF-17. MBS used the fear of a nuclear-armed independent Middle East to force the United States into a binding marriage. He turns a moment of vulnerability in Doha into the greatest strategic victory in Saudi history. The U.S. is back in the Gulf, but this time, they're there on Riyadh's terms. The sound of a single jet engine fades into silence. Thank you for joining me on ATM. Please like the video and subscribe the ATM for more deep dive.